Latvian Shipping, to be clear, is now ninth largest handy-sized and medium-ranged shipping fleet in the world. So it's very much an international business and operating throughout the world. Our current fleet consists of 20 ships. One of those is leased, but the rest of them are owned by us. And to operate that fleet, we have circa 760 sailors. So 20 boats averaging about 20, 30, 40 people per crew, 20 or 30 people per crew. You need relief crews, but we employ upwards of 750 crew members, most of those people being Latvian. Additionally, our operations here in Riga, we have one office now on Elizabeth Street. We have a bit of other real estate as well around Riga and around Latvia, certainly. But one operating office, which is on number 1 Elizabeth Street. And in there we have about 60 or 70 people now that we employ. And they're responsible really for managing the business and negotiating contracts and charter contracts and basically putting the numbers together, the finance function. We have a lot of lawyers, a legal department, and of course a very efficient ship management company. Within that team of people, we have a management board of which I'm the chairman, of 4 people, all of whom have had a very long history in the shipping business, and upwards of 20, 30 years, 2 of the members. So they're very familiar, certainly, with the tanker business internationally. Again, it's a bit of a misconception that people think the Latvian Shipping Company, unlike the Estonian Shipping Company or the Lithuanian Shipping Company, is a Baltic fleet and a Northern European company. It's really very, very much an international company. And I think this screenshot was taken maybe 10 days ago or so. Well, obviously it changes all the time, but you'll see that each of these purple dots represents one of our fleet. And they're trading in South America, the west coast of Africa. We have the Riga that trades up the west coast of America between Los Angeles and Ecuador. And there's a few up in the Baltic, Mediterranean, all over the world, in fact. So very much an international fleet, and I just want to emphasise that again. So it's we are very, therefore, challenged by what goes on in the international markets. It's not simply a local perspective we've got here. And that international market certainly could be more healthy. Unfortunately, the shipping market and certainly the tanker and even the shipbuilding market is very going through very challenging times at the moment. We, however, have, as I mentioned, we're in the sort of medium range and a medium range market, and that sector, particularly in the shipping sector, has not been as badly affected as, for example, the large crude carriers. A lot of companies highlighted this year have been, or last 2 years have been going bankrupt, and even worse stories. The major reasons for the real problem in the shipping market really has been the boom period which occurred and the profits that were being earned by the shipping companies from 2002 through 2008, and on the back of which a lot of ships were ordered because shipbuilders and ship owners were making so much money. And unfortunately, since the economic crisis kicked in 2008 plus, then our market particularly has been affected by those ships that were ordered come onto market and affecting the simple supply and demand curves. Things are looking a little bit more hopeful going forward, but we'll get onto that in a few more minutes. Revenues, these numbers come through into VN's figures obviously now on a consolidated basis, but you'll note that I'm talking here in US dollars. US dollars is used by Latvian Shipping because most of our contracts are all denominated in US dollars, and that's simply how the financial reporting works on an IF or international standard. You'll see, I mean, as I mentioned, 2008 was when the boom periods ended, and there has been quite a substantial decrease, really, in terms of revenues going down into 2011, which is reflecting more the decrease in the size of the fleet more than anything else, but also reflects, to a certain extent, the charter rates which those ships have been earning. You'll see there's been a bit of an uptick when we look at the forecast for the end of the year, and this reflects, really, considering the size of the fleet is very similar to what it was last year, and I mean there's maybe one or two boats or one or two ships halfway through the year we sold. We took 2 ships on last year. It's very similar in terms of ships, the fleet size, but this reflects really an element of the fleet which is now out on the spot market, where we've been seen to earn and trade a little bit more profitable than we were budgeting at the beginning of the year, and this comes through certainly in our net income and EBITDA figures, which we'll go into. EBITDA certainly is looking a little bit more hopeful. As you'll notice, already in the 9 months of 2012, we're at 28.2. EBITDA as earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, which is sort of a standard way that businesses measure their performance before we start looking at non-cash items and financing costs. As you'll see here, for 2000 and the 12 months of this year, already at 28.2 million, which is twice what we earned in the whole of last year from an EBITDA basis. So as a highlight, that sort of demonstrates that we are making substantial progress in terms of earnings, and that there is daylight over the horizon. Hopefully this trend will continue, and certainly from a shipping market, particularly in the tanker sector that we're in, our key objective at the moment is really survival until we can start taking advantage of rates which should improve. Anybody that's sort of familiar with the shipping industry at the moment will notice that some of the bigger stories out there are how the shipbuilding yards are vastly behind their order book from the previous years, even when last year was a very depressed market for shipbuilding. So there should be fewer and fewer ships coming onto the market, and improving our supply side of the equation in terms of demand. Demand, likewise, depends hugely, really. On the demand side, it depends on 3 or 4 things that really are out of our hands. I mean, economic growth generally around the world will affect hugely the rates that we can earn on the ships. Longer voyages, which may seem a little bit simplistic, but in terms of where the world's going, in terms of where new refineries are being built and where refineries are closing, then the market is changing drastically, such that oil products, which is the core of our business, transporting oil products around the world, is changing radically as well. So more and more longer voyages are being required from the new refineries in the east into Europe, for example. And the longer the voyages, the more miles, in theory, the higher demand for our ships, and the rates will therefore, in theory, go up. Likewise, we've been having a very successful year in terms of getting more and more validation from the major companies using our ships, chartering our ships, that they're going through vetting procedures and sort of qualifying to be used by Shell, the BPs, the Exxons. This is not something that used to happen in the past, but certainly has been a huge amount of progress has been made. And as those big customers demand higher and higher quality ships, then our fleet will be utilisable more and more. Particularly to emphasise that we have a fairly young fleet. I think average age now is about 6 years for the 20 vessels, which means that we do qualify for the main trading houses that use these ships. Hopefully, therefore, we'll be able to survive until the rates really do pick up and then can take advantage of a more lucrative market. I flicked through one slide there, and Simon's theme of transparency. If you're familiar with the website, every quarter now, we actually, for each of the class of ships that we've got, the handy size, the medium range, and the long range, we do publish a quarterly figure equivalent of the charter rates we've been earning. which is a very key indicator of where the company goes. As I mentioned, the biggest elements of how we run the business now, we've gone through a sustained period of focusing the business, is based on what can be earned in the international markets. And so these figures are very important. Obviously, if anybody locally is aware of the historical problems we've had on the charter markets, where this wasn't the case in the past, and we've suffered some significant losses, most of it was driven by Latvian Shipping chartering their ships for lower than market rates. This now is, because of the transparency, we hope we can make everybody comfortable, particularly investors and our banks, that that is no longer the case. And these rates that we're achieving stack up very favourably in terms of the actual market rates which are being attained by other operators in our segment. So, to sum up, we have those 5 key elements that we need to have a sort of a successful future. Economic growth, certainly in the sort of more economically developed markets, needs to be sustained, and the recovery needs to sort of kick in globally. It's not simply a Latvian equation here, it's international. My prediction of tanker demand exceeding the supply growth, as I mentioned about the tanker orders going down and the growth increasing, needs to actually happen. Hopefully that will continue. The longer voyages, as I mentioned, hopefully will increase. And the emerging markets will continue to emerge and prove to grow on an international basis.
The question is, can you forecast when will Latvian Shipping will start working with positive financial results, or when you will show your first profit?
Yeah, it's as I mentioned, the problem is it's our hands are tied to a certain extent, or our prospects and future is out of our hands to a certain extent. It all depends on where the world markets go. I mean, funnily enough, I mean, you see the detriment of the shipbuilding yards in China and in Asia at the moment in terms of the orders that they're not receiving to build ships, which should be a sign that the market should tighten up, which will be good for us. That's the prediction, but is the world going to recover back to where it was before, or substantially get better than it is now in terms of trading and use of energy around the world? Well, we've yet to see. I'm optimistic as well, but because the trend, even on a short-term basis, is looking good, and we're in a good sector.
And finally, could you elaborate what is the status? Latvian Shipping has a court case in London. What is the status of this court case?
Well, I mean, it'd be interesting. I think we could probably go through a 2-hour presentation on that subject alone. There's still an argument going on, a detailed argument going on, which is sort of basically sort of forming legal precedent in the UK law, frankly, on a jurisdictional basis in terms of can you take an individual from a separate company or from another country into a London court. While that issue is argued about probably up into the House of Lords over the next 6 months or so, it will be difficult to say where it goes, frankly. We have alternatives whichever way that particular decision goes, which we will then follow. But it's a little bit like a creeping ivy, I would say, at the moment.
But you still have hopes to get those $135 million back?
I'm very optimistic, yes. I think we know where most of it is, yeah, so we'll see.
That's certainly part of the victory.
Yeah.
Thank you.